I'm Mindy Donner, and the story is called Surrogate Summer. I've never been a mother. Oh, yes, I am a stepmom, but that stepson arrived fully grown. And this summer was to be a woman warrior's road trip, and I was to be in charge of the two teenagers. Well, Nick was 14 going on 40, tall, attractive, red hair, turned heads wherever we went. And I was to be her kind of surrogate mom. And she embraced me as such. And my response was, you're the daughter I never wanted. Why did I say that? I saw her recoil. I felt terrible. I tried to make that up the whole rest of the trip. Now, the trip was with two grown-up puppeteers, Joan and myself, and her daughter, Sierra, who was smaller, going to be 12, but had a couple years of judo under her belt. And then we were off from San Diego. After a wedding in Balboa Park, we headed up to Arches, the great park in Utah. Well, that's where we had our first confrontation with nature, with Nick. Now, we took the guided tour and then veered off on our own, and in our path was a rather charming lizard. So I thought. And then Nick started hollering and hooting and stomping and running the lizard down right off the trail. My heart sank. Was this to be a premonition of all of our other grand national parks? Well, somehow we made it out of there. The last time I had seen a person behave like that was when I was a kindergarten teacher and one of the boys had hit a snake over its head with a baseball bat. We went on, and we had many misadventures camping. We had simply brought too much stuff. And so it took all four of us to struggle to put up two tents and heave things back on top in the turtle on top of our van. So Nick was helpful with that. And what happened was we were standing in the doors to get a little extra height to pile everything back on top, and we were using up the battery because the lights would go on. We were in Sedona, and we lost our car keys. Well, I had one key because I had traded with Joan, and I insisted that I keep at least one key for the van. And it was a holiday. We ran around looking for the keys. Finally, the next day, we found them in the trash. Joan suspected Nick. Anyway, our battery was not charging, not even clicking. Well, the managers couldn't help us because of liability issue, so they said. And finally, we found somebody who was leaving the campgrounds, two men with an 11-year-old boy who were so kind, and we told them about all of our crazy things that had happened at the campground, including the keys and the trash. They just looked at us and smiled. Welcome to Sedona. Well, they gave us a jump. We made it to a store to buy a new battery, and that was that. Well, we went through the great country that lies through these states of Utah, the hinterlands of Wyoming, on to South Dakota, and we stopped in Cheyenne and went to the Natural History Museum, or the History Museum. And it was a charming, folksy place, but there Nick displayed her displeasure at all such places. She stood, clutching her phone, one foot against the wall, a stance I became became quite familiar with. The rest of us enjoyed the artifacts, and the two young ladies had a rather charming game that they contrived when we were going through Wyoming and into South Dakota. They would say, "Oh, we sight a two-legged," for the country was so great and so sparsely settled that there were mostly four-leggeds. And we liked it. We liked this game. And that got us through, which would have been a day and night of the doldrums for sure. Then we would stop off at various points of interest. Nick was still married to her phone and all the social media she could interact with most of the time. And so, yeah, I had expectations of the surrogacy, I admit. We went on, and when we got into the states like Ohio, and then we got into Washington, D.C., we saw all the sights. It was my first time. I was rather thrilled. Oh, the Lincoln Memorial before it had been attacked, and with paint. And we went to a natural history museum where Joan had a date with someone who was helping with one of her uncle's art collection and legacy. And so I had both young ladies with me, and Sierra was thrilled. She's probably going to be a vet, and she had her ideas about that even then at 12 years old. And she and I were excitedly looking at fossils and skeletons, and Nick was standing 1 foot against the wall, clutching her phone, staring into it. Well, we stopped at several Barnes and Nobles because Sierra was reading the Lightning Thief series. And I noticed that Nick was not even interested in looking at the books. And I asked her about her reading perceptions, and right away she assured me that when she looked at the words, she saw worms wiggling. She said that to placate me, and then I realized she was playing me. I offered no more pity. And then we were coming up north, way to the north again, on our way to Uncle Al's, Joan's Uncle Al, who lived in Barnegat, New Jersey. And we passed through Boston, and Joan decided to give the girls a course on our Revolutionary history. Well, that went down. And when we were at the battleship Constitution, both girls actually turned their backs on the venerable battleship, and Joan finally ended her course on our history. We enjoyed it though. And we headed up to Niagara Falls on a rainy and misty day. It was lovely. And then after Boston and Niagara Falls, on to New Jersey. Uncle Al. Uncle Al lived up to all the stories that Joan had regaled me with of his great nature. He thought Nick was a really good kid, just a little lonely. Well, Nick, by this time, was in the middle of her woman's mysteries, and she was howling and crying twice a day, clutching her stomach, and getting a lot of attention from Uncle Al, for sure. And we were a bit dismayed and spoke to her mother. Also, there was a little confrontation with social media, where someone had been saying some bad things about Nick's mother, and this was on Facebook, and perhaps Nick had been saying some untoward things about this kid's mother, who knows, but we had to put a stop to that. So there was a temporary halt on Facebooking. And at this time, Nick, for all purposes, spiritually and almost physically, but certainly emotionally, left our trip, and she was planning another one with another friend. I must say, when we got back to San Pedro, California, I was rather relieved to drop her off. Fast forward 6 years. It was about 2019. And I was going up to Jones and Sierra's for a visit, and I was driving just a few blocks away from their home, and I noticed a red-headed jogger alongside my car. I don't know why I looked at her, but I did. There was no shock of recognition. None. Zilch. When I got to Joan and Sierra's, the phone rang. It was Nick, who said to Sierra that she had spotted me and she'd be right over. She jogged through the door. I held open my arms. She held open her arms, and we embraced. We had arrived. Thank you.